This is the inaugural episode of the most unknown, underrated rating system for video games. Today we are rating Dead Space 2008. Write your scores in the comments and any games you would like us to rate in the future. Well, hello people, I'm Randy, this is John, and we're going to just jump right into this. We're going to just hit the ground running. So going back to 2008, it being like kind of like this alien vibe type game, the suit being kind of like this old school divers type suit, like the overall like concept is really badass.
What you're saying for like its time, because I also rated it an 8. It's like because I have some other games that like came out. It's like Fallout 3, which is a good game. It's rough around certain edges, different kind of game. I mean, there's like Devil May Cry 4, different kind of game, different kind of art style. You got Far Cry 2. It's like you look at some of these other games that came out around the same time, Army of Two, like it stands up, if not ahead of most or all of these games. Because like you're saying, with its setting, and it's very much like futuristic retro, kind of like Alien, is that you have all these organic influences in a futuristic world. Like, I mean, there's certain things that could have had more attention, but for the time period, it's like if you want to get really nitpicky about the graphics, you could bring it down. But it's like maybe the grates on the wall could look a little better. But it's
Yeah.
fucking 2008, and they blow off the wall anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The rest of the general graphics look really good. The enemy graphics are really interesting too, and they're good. They have really cool textures. They're detailed enough. I thought it was a great looking game. And like the thing, it's like, man, it came out in 2008. That was a long time ago.
Right. And I think the uniqueness of it, stands it apart because they're willing to get rid of the HUD. There's no freaking HUD. All the elements are either on the gun or on your spine because they're really focused on immersion. It's like we want to make this basically like the coolest haunted house you've ever been in, like
Yeah,
the lighting
yeah.
and all that stuff, like flickering, the textures, uneasiness.
I think they did a great job, especially given the era and the hardware that they're working with. It's like it still holds up. It looks better than some games that come out now.
To me, that was the strongest part of this entire game was how they integrated all the ambiance, the atmospheric stuff, because they're alluding to you kind of losing your mind, right? And so there's some moments in certain areas where you're like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, there's a lot of like cool intricacies in the sound design, and then it really does, like you're saying, the ambiance and like the drones and the things that are kind of going on in the background really create this sense of isolation, because it for the most part is you against everything, like looking for his girlfriend, and like, so that was a really cool aspect of it, because it does create that like sense of isolation and of where you are. So you like how you hear the groaning of the ship, the mechanics of the ship, and like air in the air ducts and stuff. It really does put you in a location. It was really cleverly done. And then even like the sound effects were really good. Walking, stomping sound effects were good. The rattling of the things in the vents. What is it? The bloop bloop bloop, when you do the hand thing for your to tell you where to go.
Oh
Your
yeah.
nav thing. Super satisfying.
There's so
Like
many
it,
satisfying little
yeah. Or
sound
like the
effects.
locked door sound, or like the open door sound. Like,
Yeah.
they're great. They do exactly what they're supposed to do, and what you are supposed to do as a sound designer.
Yeah. Last thing I almost forgot was the voice acting wasn't
Mhm.
terrible.
No, and like especially for its time, and then how a lot of it was done, because it was done over intercoms most of the time. There's not a lot of face-to-face interaction in the game.
There's
Is
always a
that even
barrier.
there's always barriers. So it's like even if when you see a person, they're behind glass and it's coming through an intercom.
Damn it! Everything is on the other side of this quarantine. We can't reach it from here.
No, we can't. But you can.
So not only placing the voices where they're actually coming from, but the effect that the voice had through the intercom, through your suit, through the video, it was really, yeah, no, it was really good.
Yeah, games are notorious for shitty voice acting, even with the best of games. So it's like,
Mhm.
but anyways, moving on. There's so much, way more when you actually break it down. There's a lot going
The
on.
game has a ton of going on. The fighting system was fairly new for that time as well. Is that it was like some games had things where you could take off limbs. Like that wasn't necessarily new, but that was a major feature of Dead Space
Oh yeah.
because you could kill an enemy quicker by taking the limbs off. If you didn't take the limbs off, they're fucking bullet sponges.
Yeah.
So it's like you just be unloading into them. They don't. It's like you have to dismember them in order to really take them. And there's some enemies that, especially it's like some of the boss fights, even that are very specific. It's like you have to hit these parts, which is typical in a
Yeah,
sense
very
for a boss
typical.
fight. But like they did it in such a really cool, interesting way, especially for that time period.
Like a lot of games didn't have like animations where things are being dismantled. I guess you kind of seen some of that stuff in other games, but not as like dynamic as this is, because
No,
your
yeah.
gun is like a fan or something like that. So it's actually cutting off right where you aimed it.
Where you aim, yeah, it was very specific. Because other games had other things where there's like dismemberment, but it was like in a general area, and it didn't
You could
change
yeah.
much about the enemy. It was more of a look, a cosmetic thing. But
Yeah,
for
because
this,
enemies
it was a
turn
core
into
mechanic.
a crawling thing half
Yeah.
the time. You could get their legs or whatever.
Yeah, it was a core mechanic within the fighting. If you don't dismember enemies, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like certain rooms, you can't. Like it would just be terrible to try to get through. Like some of those like gauntlet rooms. Like if you don't have a plan, and that's the other part about the telekinesis thing or whatever, the slowdown, because you had the slowdown and you had the throw. So using the slowdown was essential for certain enemies, and you have to be strategic about how you use it, because like the bigger, faster enemies obviously want to use it, but then you could use it to your advantage. It's like, oh, I'm gonna slow this enemy down so I can fuck up that guy, and then change to him. So there was a lot of like intricacies
yeah.
in like figuring out how to play the game.
Yeah, you can be very strategic with it. I mean, it took me a while to kind of get the ball rolling with that, because it's one of those features where I just wasn't using it, and then I was like, oh crap, this can make my life so much easier if I could just
Yeah.
integrate it into my strategery, which makes me think about the guns again, which is the types of guns and the
Yeah.
upgrades. There's a pretty interesting strategy to your upgrades and what
Yeah,
guns you
totally.
want to use, because there's credits to buy the guns,
Mm-hmm.
but if you buy the wrong one at the wrong time, or you screw up on its upgrades, that could really screw you over, especially on the harder difficulties.
Yeah, no, it's totally one of those kind of if you don't think ahead, you're gonna screw yourself. It's not just about the right now, because that's what happens with a lot of shooter games specifically. Is that it's like just fucking load up right now, finish the level, then you get to load up again. Dead Space didn't have that approach. It was really a survival horror game.
Yeah.
But then like even some of the other core mechanics, like you're saying, like we were talking about the videos that pop up, and then the map system was interesting, especially with the navigator. Like I said, that thing with the hand and it tell you where to go. That was super interesting. It was such an interesting part of the game, because instead of like with a Resident Evil game or something where you have to constantly be opening up the map and be like, okay, where the fuck do I go? It's like you could be at a split in the road and just use that and be like, oh, it wants me to go that way. But what's helpful for someone like me is that like, oh, so that means I'm going the other way, because I'm gonna get all the extra shit, and like, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna go the right way.
I mean, that's why I think we spent so much time on core mechanics, because they're so unique and different that they just stand out. And I think that
Yeah.
just hit home for everybody. That's why it just
And that's why I was like, we didn't even talk about the zero graph and like the planet walking.
that
like,
might be the one thing that was kind of annoying.
No, I agree. Like it's a little rough, but like I mean, even like the planet walking, like when you're outside and you're on the boulder or the asteroid or whatever,
Yeah.
it really used a 3-dimensional space.
Yeah.
Like other games hadn't utilized yet.
No, like I think that's why like 9 is, I think, appropriate. I think overall, I think is really awesome, and I was afraid that it was going to fall into that trap that seems like every game uses, where your like best buddy ends up being your enemy, being the one behind it all, which they kind of they did do in a way with Kendra, but
Yeah,
there's more to
yeah.
it though than just that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more depth to it, which I didn't see coming, which was cool. which is like you might be insane, or like actually Kine or whatever his name is might not be a bad guy, even though he seemed like a crazy dude. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff there, intricacies that I thought was cool.
No, there's totally like layers to it, and the reveal at the end, like you can't, you kind of see it coming, but at the same time you don't. It's a good enough twist. It worked out, and I think the motivation behind it really worked, and it fits within the story. And the fact that Isaac really doesn't do anything. Like you're just living the story as Isaac. He doesn't play a major part within the story in the sense that he has heavy dialogue and he is adding this and that. It's like no, you are experiencing the story as him. It's not like because some games like super narrative and it pushes you through and you're connecting with the character, but the character is doing all the development.
Yeah, it's a
For
movie.
you,
It's
in a
story.
sense.
It's just storytelling. It's doing everything for you instead of you doing it.
Yeah, so with
The
Isaac,
immersion.
because he doesn't say much of anything, you are experiencing the story with him as him, kind of thing, to where like you all these things are going on, and then there's the insanity aspect. It's I thought that was really interesting, and it saves it because it cuts back on unnecessary cheesy dialogue, which a lot of games have, and it can be fun, but like I don't know, I felt it was good. There's enough character development, especially because Isaac is such a blank slate, is that you don't need him to have this crazy hero arc or this crazy kind of other arc. Is that you can get invested in the other stories because you are part of those stories as well. So like you have the girlfriend arc and you have the main bad guy because you figure out with the religion and everything, like all those cool things that happen, your character doesn't have to force them. It's just happening.
Exactly.
So I thought that was really cool.
Characters kind of touched on a lot of these. Characters I think were good overall.
Yeah, because you have a 6 and I have and I have a 7. It's just like I thought, like, because none of the characters were super overdone, but they weren't also like just throwaway characters.
Yeah.
Because that's something I won't talk about protocol much, but I like with that game because I know you haven't finished. Just in general, I don't like the characters mean nothing to me.
I guess you got it all figured out.
To where in Dead Space, I'm not super invested in them, but they're there, they serve their function, and like they work within the story. So that's why I gave it more of a 7 than a 5 or a 6, because it's not like they were compelling.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, great characters. But it's not like that they were trash. And then they do their job. They function as the characters are supposed to do. So it's like, it was well written as far as like it just needed to be done.
Yeah, and that's where it wasn't over the top and it wasn't bad, so it probably could be like a 7, 6.5. I don't like I would it's not like some of the characters in God of War where they're like robust and deep.
Yeah. They've got their whole huge lore. It's like,
Yeah,
But
and you can
there's not
tell
a-
just by listening to them talk, right? Like the dialogue is like, holy fuck, they got
it's like, there's
some
not-
trauma going up, up in here.
up in here. But it's like with Dead Space, so there's not like I can name a character that I'm like, oh, you need to get rid of that character, or that character doesn't serve a purpose. I can't. It's like I can't name like by name a lot of the characters, but I know how they all function. They move the story along. But there's not a single one I can think of. I was like, well, if you just cut that, it'd be fine. Like that character is useless.
Right, you needed all those people to move the story along. Yeah, so. Yeah, enemies and the boss fights. So enemies, I would say it was definitely not shitty, above average. So yeah, I put it around 7, and it was because it was unique. You have the whole slicing of the arms and how they change and adapt to that, which is really cool. Some of them you chop off their head and they're still freaking alive.
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything.
You got the ones that are like stuck against the wall and you have to chop off its tentacles, otherwise it keeps spewing out its little babies that shoot like rockets, which I think is kind of freaking weird.
Like the weird like bone needle rockets.
Yeah. And
it's like, and then you had the weird almost like slug things that were just like an upper body with like the scorpion kind of tail.
oh yeah, because it had a scorpion type of hit too, which is pretty cool.
Like it had an interesting variety of enemies because you did have the variety, and then but it made you learn the enemies, but not in a shit way.
Right.
Like for me, it's not like Dark Souls, to where it's like every enemy kind of looks the same, and then you have to figure out, oh, what bullshit do I have to learn about this one enemy to make it tolerable? Obviously, if you learn how to beat these enemies in the game, it makes it much easier. Like you're saying, when hitting the tentacles and like knowing those things, it helps. But you could just fucking plow your way through it. It's gonna not be fun, or it's gonna be a lot harder. But
Have less
it was cool. It
ammo
was
at the end of
interesting.
it.
Yeah. So there was a really cool strategy about it, and then like it made you play the game. It wasn't just a run and gun game. Is that if you don't pay attention to the enemies, you're not gonna have as much fun because they're gonna fuck you up, especially when in those like hordes when they're coming at you. It's like
Yeah, you
got
can't
the
be
three
too
babies on the
aggressive, yeah.
wall, two scorpions, and then you got the hands guys coming at you. Like if you're not strategic, you're just gonna die.
Yeah.
It's just not like so. It makes it interesting as far as like making you learn the game and learn how to play it.
Yeah.
It could have been more variety, could have been cooler, but I mean that's why I think it sits at a 7. It's not just unload into it
Yeah.
and it's all good. It had made you think and then strategize, because a lot of the rooms it's like you get so close to finishing it, and then you get a bullshit death. And you're like, fuck.
But as far as the bosses, not so much, I would say.
Yeah,
They're more
that's
like they're like RE2 train bosses for the
kind
most
of,
part.
yeah.
Like the one
So-
in the cylinder, it's basically what it is. Tentacles and
Yeah.
a mouth that you have to shoot in the hole.
Yeah, it was definitely they had a lot of set piece bosses. So because then you can kind of see the brutes and the hunters as like mini bosses, because they're like staged fights. Like
Yeah.
the one with the hunter where you keep fighting it through the different rooms, and it has its like different evolutions. And that guy's an asshole.
Because
Yeah.
it doesn't die. Like,
Yeah,
except
yeah.
if you use the special environmental stuff to kill it, which is either
Yeah.
the spaceship, or the cryo chamber.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you
And-
just gotta book it.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like that fight was because it was a multi like stage fight and it was interesting. It's kind of annoying, but it's interesting. Like it was an alright boss. And then like because you have the brutes that kind of worked as bosses in certain areas, because you had it in the
Looks like an atrium basically. It's really high.
Kind
up
of,
and
yeah,
has
yeah,
all the
yeah.
windows. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the first time you see him or whatever, and he just like plows through the door. Luckily,
Yeah.
there's a way to, if you didn't like get all the shit you needed for that fight, you can go into the other room and go to the store and re-up or
Yeah.
whatever.
So I mean, the first time with that was cool because then they keep kind of coming back. But then that's like you had the tentacle that is it like a mini boss that would like drag you through the rooms. They'd fly through the wall and grab your leg, and
It was kind of
Yeah.
like a pseudo quick time event though.
Kind
because
of, yeah.
Because you had to shoot the tentacle and that little yellow elbow
Exactly.
thing before
Yeah.
you got to the end.
yeah, or you die.
Yeah, there would,
It's
but
it-
like
it-
aiming
it
was
frees
like,
you.
holy fuck.
Yeah,
but in a way, it's kind
exactly.
of cool. Right. But it was like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because then you've got the asteroid boss, which is just a set piece boss, and even the end boss is kind of like that as well. It's like because they have the 3 set piece bosses, and then like the 3 kind of other bosses.
Yeah.
So
Because the set piece ones, even the one in that anti-gravity chamber, it's like a cylinder. I mean,
Yeah.
as long as you kind of keep moving around, you're not going to get hit. And you
Yeah.
just turn around and shoot it in his face or mouth hole. And then the one at the end, I mean, maybe because I wasn't on hard mode and I wish I actually was, because there were some moments where I was like, what? That's it? And it's like I was getting hit a bunch, but my health was not going down. Like it almost
really?
gave me a
Okay.
little bit of a pass, which I thought was kind of lame.
interesting.
Like, because I mean,
Yeah.
that freaking giant tentacle comes down. It's like
Yeah.
40,000 tons, and you didn't get like hurt. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, it felt like Resident Evil 2-ish though.
Oh yeah,
Train
or it's
boss.
like yeah, it felt kind of like those like with kind of like the final Nemi in RE3R.
Yeah, and I don't mind them. I think they're fun. I enjoy them. Yeah, because I put a 6 just because they're just. I mean, besides the mini ones, if I was to put those in there, because I wasn't really sure if they were, then it probably would go up to a 7. because those guys were awesome, especially the one that never died. It just kept
Mhm.
fucking coming back. But anyways, so fun factor to me was honestly through the roof. Once I started playing it, it was very addictive, very satisfying. The guns that I liked, I really liked. The mini games, always awesome to see stuff like that. Yeah, because it's just like a nice touch to break up the grind, of course.
Yeah, yeah, especially where they're put within the game, and like the fun factor is really cool because it ties into the replayability. Is that like when you look at the items, is that there's different ways to play the game. So it's like I'm really all about like the main item, the cutter,
I
and
love the
like
cutter.
yeah. So it's
Straight
like
up.
what is I think the pulse one's kind of like the shotgun, right? Because you have the machine gun and you have kind of like the shotgun, the spread one. I feel like it's like a shotgun, the one that does like the big like it's
Because
almost
there's
like
the
a
cutter,
dial.
there's like oh yeah, it was like Guile. It was like the
Yeah,
sonic boom, and
yeah,
but it was kind of still in the same vein as the cutter though, as your main
yeah.
weapon.
So there's a lot of different things that go into how you play the game and adds that replayability and that fun factor. And it was scary. It gets you. There's times where it jump scares you like a motherfucker, and you're like, "Gosh, I knew,
I
but it
knew
still got
that.
me."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Those
like
are
it
the
was,
ones.
they tried things like one of the worst parts of the game that's not as fun as replaying it. What's still interesting was the asteroid thing.
Yeah, that was
Like
super annoying. Yeah.
the rail shooter part was super annoying, but it's like one of those things. When I first play through, you're like, oh, it's kind of challenging. It's I don't like it that much, but it works. It's changing, like it changes things up. It's different. Um,
Yeah, the first time
it's
I actually let it die so that I can do it again with a little bit more touch.
understanding.
But my goodness, with like
Yeah,
aiming
it's
that,
not
that
very.
is terrible.
It's yeah. That was one of the parts where it's like I see what you tried to do. You didn't accomplish it that well, but it breaks up the game and it shows that they were trying things. And for that to be the only thing that really missed, I
Oh,
think was really interesting. But it fits with that kind of games of the time too. That you needed that section, but other than that one part, the replayability of it is great. I don't find myself like not wanting to do any other sections of the game. There's parts that were tricky that were a pain in the ass, but they were still fun. Other than like the rail shooter,
because
like
it
the
kind
RE.
of it kind of took away from the overall like vibe of the game. It's like, what is this? Kind of
Mhm.
corny almost. Like, let's play some Chuck E. Cheese stuff. Like, where did this come from? Even like I really liked the that Star Wars area where you're having to fly from whatever you want to call it, barrier to barrier.
Yeah,
Was kind of annoying because you didn't know where exactly to stand to not get hit by asteroids.
yeah,
So it took me like 4 tries. I'm like, ah, or it's more than that actually. But
yeah. But I mean, for the most part, but, like, it's one of those things like that I also kind of forget about until I get there. Unless I'm like critically thinking about the game, I'm always like, oh yeah, you're going along, like, oh yeah, this part. But then once you're done with it, you're like, okay, this part's over. Now I can have fun with the rest of the game.
yeah,
So like, I think that's why the replayability is so high. And lots of games have that. I mean, there's the water temple, there's Sherry's part. There's parts in every game to where you're like, okay, it's this fucking part. So at least it was only one. It wasn't that long.
well, obviously it was fun and addictive, so that adds to the replay. They also have like things that upgrading other weapons and getting used to those.
Yeah, and you had like different difficulties you could play the game at. If you want to do the lore run through, so you're getting all the files and videos. Maybe you want to do a cutter only. Like
Yeah, I
there's
want to do
there's a
that.
lot of like different runs of the game that you can do that, and it's not too long of a game that it um takes away from some of that. Like something like like Fallen Order. I really like Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen Order, but it's fucking long. So I've beaten it what maybe 3 times now or 2.5 times.
Holy crap! Yeah, that's even.
Yeah, so it's like as much as I like that game, it takes so long to get through it that I I've beaten it on the hardest level. I've done 2 playthroughs. I had the one death playthrough, and it was like I don't need to play this anymore. If I just want to like hang out and like kill stormtroopers, cool. But like I'm not gonna like play through this game again because it's a fucking 40-hour playthrough. And like,
Yeah,
damn.
those are
So,
rough. And if you can, there's certain games where with the new game plus you come as like a freaking
mhm, a juggernaut.
badass juggernaut.
And that makes it fun because then you can have fun playthroughs. Because I
Yeah.
love New Game Plus 3 playthroughs because there's not serious. You're just like, I'm just gonna destroy.
Yeah, it's like cheat codes. Yeah, like that's
Yeah,
kind of
so
the
it's-
feel of cheat
yeah.
codes.
So it's fun. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
always an awesome thing to replayability.
Moving to worth the money. Back then and now, I don't know if I'd pay $60 for it right now, but like I would probably do it. Yeah, I don't know. Like it, just because I'm like stingy with that kind of stuff, and I know it's 100 years old,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth it. Yeah.
It was worth it at the time completely. It's worth the play now. That's when I kind of think of it. It's like, yeah, if you bought Dead Space today, but if you look at it, what it's worth today, I think it's about $10 or maybe $14
Oh,
on the
gosh.
stores. Like even $20. Like it's worth
Yeah.
it. Even $30, it's worth it today. It's worth the play.
But yeah, 78 and 82.
Mm-hmm.
Arbitrary. Yeah. So whatever.
If you like survival horror, if you like sci-fi, horror, like it's a good game. It's a high quality game. That's why I think the remake is going to be well received, and like it really deserved it. Is that people wanted to play it again. It's just like some of those Resident Evil games. Like certain games really kind of quote unquote deserve remakes, or they warrant them because they're good.
Yeah.
You want to keep playing them.
Yeah, you want to keep
Like,
playing them, and you're willing to pay for a new, fleshed out, little extra juice in the tank kind of remake. Because even with Callisto though, like you get a vibe of what you might get as far as like sound design, environmental stuff. Like
Yeah.
some of that shit is so well done. Yeah, because that's kind of tough. Because I'm sure you get all the assets and all the things that you need to make it as awesome as possible. I don't know what kind of like liberties you have with it. As long as they keep that core shit, it shouldn't. It can't be that bad.
Yeah.
The only problem is if it can't run
function.
okay?
That was my only thing. Yeah, because like that's just to talk about it for 1 second. That's one thing that was really like the worst part about Callisto Protocol was just how it just didn't function. So if Dead Space is like that, I'm going to be very, very upset because not only is it disrespects the game and kind of like the fans, it's just a really bad precedent for gaming companies to set because that's starting to become a thing, and it's been kind of a thing for a while to where you ship unfinished products. Callisto Protocol is bad.
Well, yeah.
Like-
There's a whole debate of how jacked up the last few years are, and that like no one has any of the new consoles for almost 2 years, and
Yeah.
so it's like we have to make sure that they work on other consoles too, and so there's a lot of shit behind it, but there's still
Yeah.
no excuse by putting it out. And it's like, yeah, we're gonna, people are gonna hate us. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
push it back 6 months. Sorry, guys. Like,
But I'm one of the people. It's like I'd much rather you delay it instead of me paying
push it forward.
$70 for a game that doesn't work for 2 years.
yeah, we have
Like-
a million games to go through in our freaking backlog. Like,
Yeah,
it's gonna be okay. Or don't tell us about it. Like, freaking
Yeah.
don't tell us anything. We
Yeah.
won't miss what we don't know is coming out. Like, freaking don't tease us. But we'll see how this new one goes. As far as my predictions, I would probably say, some of those enemies will lift up to probably like an 8 or 9, and maybe the core mechanics, sound design will definitely either stay at a 9 or 10. It probably,
Yeah.
that's why I don't know about comparing them, but as far as all that goes, I don't think they're going to be going down much.
Yeah, I think really my expectation for it when we look at kind of like our rating system is it's going to be basically the same. Maybe characters might go up a little bit.
Characters, yeah.
Maybe enemies might go up a little bit. But I think it's going to stay about the same. The sound design is going to be good. The graphics already look cool. And graphics aren't a big issue as far as like capability now. I think sometimes like Callisto Protocol looked beautiful, but it's like if you can't play it, it doesn't matter if it looks good or not. Because as long as they don't mess it up too much, it's still going to be a 7 or an 8 game. If they do it correctly, it's going to be a 9 or a 10 game. So
Yeah,
that's
and-
my
Yeah.
expectation for it.
The probably the biggest one that could really be screwed up, the easiest to be screwed up is the story. If they like go in and add some extra shit, or they're trying to like make some characters more involved, or I don't know, they could really rub people the wrong way. I'm a pretty easygoing person when it comes to gaming, so I'm sure I'll be fine. But at the same time, like, yeah, we'll see. It's sad to hear about the Callisto Protocol thing.
Yeah, like, we'll talk about another day, because I have a bunch to say about the Callisto Protocol.
And, so at the end of the day, it looks like we're around the same, 8-ish. And we'll try to do this again for some other games. Let us know what your score is in the
please
comments and whatnot. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah.
Enjoy Dead Space. I know we will.